Something has shifted in the spiritual realm, and if you're quiet enough inside, you can feel it. Not as noise, not as chaos, but as a subtle release, like a pressure that has finally lifted. What once felt like a solid wall in your love life, immovable, painful, and endlessly confusing, now feels different. Softer, open, as if a path has been prepared ahead of you, not by human effort, not by timing tricks, but by God Himself. This message is not for everyone. It is for those who have waited longer than they ever imagined they would. For those who prayed until their prayers felt dry, who hoped until hope felt dangerous, who stood on the shore of uncertainty watching the waves crash and wondering if they had misunderstood God completely. If your heart resonates with the story of the Red Sea, the impossible obstacle, the long delay, the command to move when nothing made sense, then this is for you. Because the truth is, delays in God are rarely denials. Often, they are strategies. And what looks like God withholding love is, in reality, God protecting it. There is a reason you couldn't force this door open before. A reason every attempt felt heavy, confusing, or one-sided. A reason the timing never aligned no matter how much you tried to do the right thing. You weren't being punished. You were being positioned. Just as the Israelites stood trapped between Pharaoh's army and the sea, you stood between your past wounds and your future promise. And only God could make a way where there was no way. Now, the atmosphere has changed. And when God clears a path, He always leaves signs, not to manipulate you, not to pressure you, but to guide you gently into obedience. There are 3 clear signs that reveal when the Red Sea has parted in love. These signs don't scream, they don't rush, they don't feed anxiety, they bring clarity, peace, and a quiet but undeniable call to move forward in faith. The first sign is this: obsession turns into peace. Before God clears the path, love feels consuming in the wrong way. Your thoughts loop endlessly. You analyze every word, every delay, every silence. You pray, but the prayers are fueled by fear, fear of loss, fear of being forgotten, fear of missing your chance. Your emotions rise and fall based on external responses. That is not peace. That is striving. But when God has gone ahead of you, something shifts internally. The constant mental noise fades. The urge to control disappears. You still care deeply, but the desperation is gone. You are no longer checking signs compulsively or asking everyone for advice. Instead, there is a grounded calm. You feel steady. You feel anchored. Even if the outcome is not fully visible yet, your spirit rests. This peace is not indifference. It is alignment. It is the same peace Moses carried when he lifted his staff over the sea. The waters had not yet parted, but heaven had already decided. And that inner knowing, that quiet assurance, is often the first confirmation that God has handled what you could not. If you've noticed that you're no longer obsessed with the outcome, that you can release control without panic, that you can trust without clinging, that is not emotional numbness. That is spiritual readiness. The second sign is undeniable confirmation you didn't force. When God clears the path, He confirms it in ways that remove doubt rather than create it. These confirmations are not vague or coincidental in a way that requires mental gymnastics. They come naturally, repeatedly, gently, through scripture, through conversations you weren't trying to have, through moments that align too perfectly to dismiss. What's important here is this: you didn't chase the signs. They came to you. Maybe someone spoke a word that answered a prayer you hadn't voiced out loud. Maybe a verse appeared at the exact moment you were questioning everything. Maybe circumstances shifted suddenly without you pushing them. Or maybe the other person's posture changed in a way that reflected healing, maturity, or clarity you had prayed for but couldn't produce. God's confirmations don't create anxiety. They bring relief. When something is not from God, signs feel confusing. They pull you in opposite directions. They require you to ignore your conscience or compromise your values. But when the path is cleared by God, confirmations stack peacefully. You don't have to convince yourself. You simply recognize the pattern. Just as the Israelites didn't have to imagine the sea parting, they watched it happen. God's confirmation removes the need for guesswork. It doesn't mean every detail is explained. It means enough has been revealed for obedience to begin. And that leads to the third sign, the one many people misunderstand. The third sign is a calm but powerful urgency to act. This is not panic. This is not fear-based rushing. This is not, if I don't move now I'll lose everything. This is a holy urgency, the kind that comes when heaven has already shifted and delay would mean disobedience. When the sea parted, God didn't ask the Israelites to analyze it for weeks. He said, Move forward. Staying on the shore would have been just as dangerous as running back to Egypt. Timing matters in God's plans, and obedience is often required even when comfort says, wait a little longer. This urgency feels clear, not chaotic. It doesn't scream at you. It doesn't threaten you. It simply nudges you forward with confidence. You feel ready in a way you weren't before. Old fears no longer have authority. Past wounds no longer dictate your decisions. You're not trying to recreate the past or protect yourself at all costs. You're trusting God enough to step where He has already made room. This is where many people hesitate, not because they don't love God, but because they're afraid of repeating old patterns. Afraid of losing control, afraid of mistaking their own desire for God's voice. But here's the truth. God does not heal you halfway just to set you up for the same pain again. If He cleared the path, He also prepared you to walk it. The version of you standing here now is not the same version that failed before, settled before, or got hurt before. Healing has occurred. Discernment has grown. Boundaries have been strengthened. You are not moving from desperation. You are moving from obedience. This message is not about chasing someone who is unavailable. It is not about forcing a relationship into existence. It is not about ignoring red flags and calling it faith. This is about recognizing when God has already gone ahead of you. When love no longer costs you your peace. When confirmation meets you without manipulation. When action feels aligned instead of forced. That is Red Sea love. It looks impossible from the outside, but it unfolds effortlessly once God intervenes. It doesn't glorify you. It glorifies Him. It doesn't trap you in anxiety. It teaches you trust. And yes, crossing still requires courage. The ground may feel unfamiliar. The walls of water may remind you how close danger once was. But the path is dry. The way is open, and staying behind is no longer safer than moving forward. If this message resonates with your spirit, don't ignore it. Not every word is meant to be consumed privately. Sometimes, obedience looks like sharing hope with someone else who is still standing on the shore, convinced the sea will never move for them. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share this message with someone who has been waiting, praying, and doubting in silence. And if you feel led, comment your testimony. Your story may be the confirmation someone else has been asking God for. Because God's timing in love is never late. His delays are intentional, and when He clears the path, it's not to tease you, it's to invite you to cross. There is a moment many people miss, right after the sea parts, right before the first step is taken. It is the moment where fear tries one last time to disguise itself as wisdom. It whispers, what if this closes again? What if you misunderstood? What if you get hurt like before? And if you don't recognize this voice for what it is, you can mistake hesitation for discernment. But discernment feels different. Discernment is calm. Fear is loud. Discernment brings clarity. Fear brings endless questions. When God clears the path, He does not leave you in confusion. He may not give you every answer, but He gives you enough peace to move without self-betrayal. This is why the waiting season mattered so much. You weren't just waiting for circumstances to change. You were waiting for your inner posture to change. God was removing the need to be chosen, the need to prove your worth, the need to cling. He was teaching you how to love without losing yourself, how to trust without abandoning wisdom, how to move forward without abandoning Him. Many people want Red Sea miracles, but they don't want Red Sea preparation. They don't want the stripping. They don't want the silence. They don't want the lonely obedience. They don't want the nights where it felt like God was quiet while everyone else moved forward. But those nights shaped your discernment. That's why now, when this opportunity presents itself, you're not intoxicated by fantasy. You're grounded, you're sober-minded, you're aware of both the promise and the responsibility. That's not hesitation, that's maturity. And maturity is what keeps love from becoming an idol. One of the clearest indicators that God is involved in this love is that it no longer competes with Him. You're not neglecting your spiritual life to pursue it. You're not bending your convictions to keep it. You're not hiding it from God because you're afraid of His opinion. Instead, you're inviting Him into every step, every thought, every decision. That alone tells you this is different. Because anything that pulls you away from God cannot be sent by Him. But anything that draws you closer to truth, honesty, healing, and responsibility, that carries His fingerprint. You may notice that your prayers sound different now. You're no longer begging. You're no longer bargaining. You're no longer making promises out of fear. Your prayers are simpler. Lead me. Keep me aligned. If this is not from you, remove it. And the fact that you can pray that last sentence sincerely is proof of growth. It means you trust God more than the outcome. That is not something you had before. Another thing that changes when God clears the path is how you view timing. You stop rushing the process and start respecting the pace. You're willing to move forward, but you're not frantic. You understand that obedience doesn't mean recklessness. Faith doesn't cancel wisdom. Courage doesn't eliminate boundaries. You can be open without being naive. You can be hopeful without being blind. You can be loving without being self-sacrificial in unhealthy ways. This balance is rare, and it's not learned through teaching, it's learned through experience. Through heartbreak, through disappointment, through prayers that weren't answered the way you wanted, through doors that closed when you were sure they were meant to open. Those closed doors were not failures. They were filters. They filtered out versions of love that would have cost you your identity. They filtered out connections that would have fed your wounds instead of healing them. They filtered out timelines that would have required you to shrink to fit someone else's limitations. So now, when the door finally opens, you don't run through it desperate and unprepared. You walk through it aware, grounded, and anchored. This is why the urgency you feel now is not panic, it's purpose. It's the awareness that staying where you are out of fear is no longer obedience. It's the realization that comfort can become disobedience when God has already spoken. Just as the Israelites could not camp forever between the sea walls, you cannot remain frozen at the edge once the way is made clear. Faith is not passive. Faith responds. And sometimes, the greatest act of faith is allowing yourself to receive what you once believed you were disqualified from. That's hard for people who have learned to survive disappointment by expecting less. You taught yourself not to hope too much, not to believe too deeply, not to trust too fully. It kept you safe for a while, but it can't take you into the promise. God doesn't part seas so you can admire them. He parts them so you can cross. Crossing means vulnerability. Crossing means honesty. Crossing means risking something real. But it also means freedom. Freedom from cycles. Freedom from confusion. Freedom from always wondering, what if? And here's something important you need to hear. Crossing doesn't guarantee perfection. It guarantees obedience. There may still be challenges, conversations, adjustments, growth, but the foundation is different. You're not building on fantasy. You're building on clarity. If you've been asking God for a sign, this is often how He answers, not with lightning from the sky, but with inner alignment that refuses to be ignored. You feel it when you try to go backward and your spirit resists. You feel it when you imagine moving forward and peace follows. You feel it when fear speaks and something deeper in you stays steady. That steadiness is not self-confidence. It's God confidence. And God confidence doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to convince everyone. It simply moves when instructed. This is also where many people misunderstand obedience. They think obedience means losing autonomy, losing selfhood, losing discernment. In reality, obedience to God sharpens all three. You become more yourself, not less. You become more aware, not blind. You become more grounded, not dependent. If you're worried about losing control, remember this: God never asked you to surrender wisdom, only pride. He never asked you to abandon boundaries, only fear. He never asked you to silence discernment, only distrust. When He clears the path, He walks with you through it. So if you're standing here now, sensing that something has shifted, feeling that this season is different, recognizing that your heart is no longer frantic but ready, don't dismiss it. Not every miracle feels dramatic. Some feel inevitable once you're prepared. And that preparation didn't come easily. You earned this clarity through surrender. You earned this peace through endurance. You earned this readiness through obedience when no one was watching. Now the invitation is simple, but not easy. Trust God enough to step forward without demanding guarantees. Love was never meant to be a battlefield you survive. It was meant to be a place you steward with wisdom and faith. If God cleared the path, it's because He trusts you to walk it differently this time. Not driven by fear, not ruled by wounds, not blinded by fantasy, but grounded, healed, and attentive to His voice. And once you cross, you'll realize something profound. The sea didn't part to test your courage, it parted to reveal how faithful God has been all along. There is a sacred weight to the moment after you decide to move. It's not the rush of adrenaline people imagine. It's quieter than that, heavier in a holy way. Because once you choose to step forward in obedience, you can no longer pretend you didn't hear God clearly. The decision itself becomes a testimony that you trust Him more than your fear. This is where many people feel exposed. Not because others are watching, but because heaven is witnessing your response. Up until now, it was easy to say, I'm waiting on God. Waiting feels safe. Waiting feels spiritual. Waiting allows you to remain untested. But when God says, go, waiting can become a disguise for fear. And fear, when left unchallenged, slowly reshapes itself into spiritual language so it doesn't have to leave. That's why this moment matters so much. You are not being rushed, you are being released. Released from old narratives that told you love always ends in loss. Released from the identity of the one who almost had something but never fully stepped into it. Released from the belief that God gives promises but withholds fulfillment. None of that was ever true. But pain can make lies feel convincing. One of the clearest shifts you'll notice now is how you relate to uncertainty. Before, uncertainty paralyzed you. You needed reassurance, clarity, constant evidence. Now, uncertainty still exists, but it no longer controls you. You've learned that God doesn't eliminate uncertainty, He teaches you how to walk through it without collapsing. That's faith. Faith isn't confidence in the outcome. Faith is confidence in God's character. And His character has already been proven in your life, even in seasons you didn't understand at the time. If you look back honestly, you'll see it. The relationships that ended before they destroyed you. The connections that never progressed, even when you wanted them to. The delays that felt cruel but protected your heart from timing that would have broken you. God wasn't absent in those moments. He was attentive. And now, as you stand here, the reason this love feels different is not because the person is perfect or the situation is flawless. It's because you're no longer asking love to heal what only God could heal. You did that work already, painfully, slowly, faithfully. That's why this connection doesn't feel like rescue. It feels like partnership. You're not looking to be saved. You're not trying to be completed. You're not hoping someone will give you an identity. You know who you are now. You know what you carry. You know what you will and will not tolerate. That level of self-awareness is not accidental. It's the result of God's refinement. Another sign that God has cleared the path is that you are no longer willing to abandon truth to maintain peace. You're ready to have honest conversations. You're willing to ask real questions. You're not afraid of clarity, even if clarity might mean walking away. That's a level of freedom you didn't have before. Before, you were afraid that honesty would cost you love. Now, you understand that dishonesty would cost you yourself. And God will never ask you to trade yourself for love. This is why fear keeps trying to remind you of past failures. It wants you to believe that history will repeat itself automatically. But history only repeats when lessons are ignored. You didn't ignore them, you learned them. You learned to slow down. You learned to listen. You learned to watch actions, not just words. You learned to bring God into the process early, not as an emergency contact. Those lessons didn't come cheap. So don't dishonor them by shrinking back now. If this is from God, it will not require you to compromise your integrity. It will require courage, but courage built on truth, not fantasy. It will stretch you, but not fracture you. It will challenge you, but not confuse you. And if at any point peace leaves, God will speak again. He is not silent when His children are in danger. He is not distant when guidance is needed. He is not unclear when obedience matters. The same God who parted the sea is still present on the path. Sometimes people think the miracle ends when the waters separate. But in reality, the miracle continues with every step taken on ground that used to be impossible. Each step is sustained by grace. Each step is protected by His presence. You don't have to sprint. You don't have to perform. You don't have to prove anything. You just have to keep walking. And yes, there may be moments where you hear the echoes of the past, the voices that told you this would never happen, that you were asking for too much, that love like this wasn't meant for you. Those voices are not prophecy. They are residue. Residue from seasons where you survived instead of lived. But survival is not the standard God has for you. He called you to abundance, not excess, but wholeness. A love that doesn't consume you, but complements you. A connection that doesn't replace God, but reflects His goodness. That's why this season feels both gentle and serious at the same time. Gentle, because you're not forcing anything. Serious, because you recognize the responsibility of stewardship. Love is a stewardship. How you enter it matters. How you speak in it matters. How you honor God within it matters. This isn't about romance as an escape. It's about relationship as an assignment. And that can feel heavy, until you realize you're not carrying it alone. God doesn't reveal timing without providing grace. He doesn't open doors without giving wisdom. He doesn't invite you forward without promising His presence. So if your heart is steady right now, not numb, not anxious, just steady, pay attention. That steadiness is rare, it's sacred, it's often the final confirmation before movement. And when you finally cross, when you look back and realize the sea has closed behind you, you'll understand something that couldn't be explained before. The waiting was not wasted, the delay was not punishment, and the path was not cleared to test you, it was cleared because you were ready. Ready to love without losing yourself. Ready to trust without abandoning discernment. Ready to walk forward without constantly looking back. And that readiness is the real miracle.